Hey y'all, how you doing? I I've been kind of incognito. Honestly, I've been avoiding doing this video because I really don't want to do it. But I've been called to do it, and so here goes. Today we're going to talk about grief. Now, the reason why it's taken me so long, I've been holding this for almost 2 weeks. I'm not going to lie. Because I did just have a death in the family, and also it was Mother's Day. And though I had a beautiful Mother's Day, my family showed up for me in beautiful ways, I was missing my mother. Some Mother's Days are worse than others, and this one, I think it was because that we had the death and the burial was the day before Mother's Day, and I can just imagine. I just know it was a lot, and I'm still not there yet. I'm still in grief. But I'm going to be obedient, and I'm going to talk about it today. So, what is the definition of grief? Okay, the definition is profound sorrow, anguish experienced in response to loss. Now, the difference between that and mourning is actually the outward expression of loss. So, grief itself could be inside, whereas mourning is more you're expressing it. Okay. Now, there are 5 types of grief. It's actually more like 10, but these are the top 5. Okay. Anticipatory grief, and that is when you are kind of preparing for a loss. Say this person has a terminal illness, and you know that death is inevitable, right? And so you have this anticipatory grief. So it would be before the loss. And then the second one is acute, and that is you have grief right away. Immediately after the loss happened, you would have this grief. And then we have normal. Now, normal comes with its own set of subs, right? Normal is common feelings, behaviors, emotions, and thoughts related to said grief, right? So it's like the normal thing that happens with you, right? Because we all have some kind of response when we lose something. But in normal, there is physical grief. And that is when your body responds to said grief. So whether that be tightness in the chest, like you would if you had anxiety, shortness of breath, your inability to speak, like you literally are in a space where you have this tension, your body is responding to grief. Emotionally, you may feel numbness, of course, sadness, some fears, some guilt, some shame, and a lot of times anger, which is also a stage of grief. But sometimes the sadness and the anger, especially in our community, can be misinterpreted. But we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Cognitive, that's where you may be confused. You may have dreams of the deceased. You may see the deceased. You may hear them. You may feel their presence, if you will. And that is called like a cognitive grief. And then there's behavior, where you're impaired to a point where it affects your daily life. You are unable to, perform at work. You have withdrawals. All of these different things that happen to you because of said grief. And then the next one is disenfranchised. Now, this grief is not necessarily related to just a loss of a person. Now, let's be clear. When we talk about grief is not just about someone dying. Okay, this could be loss of a relationship. It could be loss of your way of life. It could be loss of freedom. There are many different losses that we could have that could cause us to experience grief. Okay, so it's not always that you lost a person, but you could have lost yourself, like in divorce or separation, that kind of thing. Now, disenfranchised grief is grief over any loss that is not validated or recognized. So, like for instance, people who may have had stillborn baby, or maybe even people who had to terminate a pregnancy, they had a loss. And there's an assumption that if a person has terminated a pregnancy, that obviously that's what they wanted to do and they don't have any symptoms, but that's not true. They also experience grief. Okay. Someone who maybe died of AIDS, or or like I said, a divorce before, like those type of things, people don't, because there's so much shame around like HIV and AIDS. A lot of people are not validated for their grief, because the thing is like, well, this is what happened and they did this and that and the other to get it, even though you don't know what they did, right? They could have been born with it, you just never know. But a lot of times there's so much shame around that their feelings are not validated. Okay, and they're unable to speak about it, and so that makes this a disenfranchised grief. And then there's complicated grief. Now, with complicated grief, the best way to describe this is intense and prolonged grief that impacts your daily life. It impacts work, your relationships, your well-being. I mean, it impacts every single thing. Okay. And it's one of those things that you can't put in a box, right? Like with the normal, I mean, that's normal. The stages of grief, you kind of go through it and then you're done, right? And the thing is, with grief, there is really no set time frame for grief. But when you have complicated grief, it's like a re-triggering of the grief. And so complicated grief, it can go on for a long time, and it can be very intense. It could be like it just happened yesterday when it was 20 years ago. Okay. Now, there are types of complicated grief. You have chronic, and that's it's part of normal, but it's prolonged. Okay. You have delayed, and that's when you're suppressing your grief. Like maybe you're trying to get through the funeral, or you're trying to keep everybody together, keep the family going, try to be the supportive person. And that particular grief can be suppressed because you feel like you can't show that grief. You can't feel that grief right now because you're needed, right? So that would be delayed. And then there's exaggerated grief, and that's where it's intense. You have night terrors, you have phobias, you even may have suicide ideation, okay? And in that, right, because, suicide ideation, remember I said 911 is your friend, all right? And there's also 988 where you can text if you need some support. But, grief can have so many feelings, and it could just cause so many issues within us, especially if we feel like we can't freely express it, right? So that could cause us to have suicide ideation. There's masked grief, and that is where the behaviors interfere with the normal functioning of life. Even it's at a point where it's masked, you're unaware. It's kind of like you don't know that you're experiencing grief. You think you're okay. You're just like, I'm fine. It's okay. I know loss happens. I'm fine. But it's literally affecting everything. It reminds me of this Dear Wifey episode where Lexi, I can't remember her last name right now, but she was on it, and she was talking about how when she lost her husband, she basically lost herself. And there was a pastor who prayed for her and asked her to get out of the grave. Now, she thought she was doing everything she needed to do. She was going on with her life. She had even married someone else, but she wasn't herself. She had like disconnected from who she is as a person, to a point where this other husband that she married ended up like taking advantage of her really badly. She just wasn't herself, but she didn't realize she wasn't herself. She was still working. She was still doing her thing, but she just didn't realize that same spunk that she had, or that personality that was so sparkly, how she did things, she just didn't do it anymore. And it took someone to pray over her, and someone to say, sweetheart, you lost yourself in this death. Come on out of the grave, right? A lot of times that happens to us and we don't realize that. And that can happen, like I said, not just with a loss of a loved one or, like a death, right? It can happen in relationships when, you have domestic violence going on or near death experiences and that kind of thing. You can literally get disconnected to a point where you lose yourself and you need to reconnect, right? And that was an example of how that happened for her. But it was a death. It was a death. Now, the stages of grief, it's denial, right? And that's where you refuse to acknowledge that there was a death at all. Like, nope, this person did not die. No, there's no way that, no, this couldn't be true. It can't be true, right? And again, that's a regular stage. And sometimes people can't believe it until they're at the funeral and the person is going in the ground, okay? And again, that's normal. Anger. Now, with us, as Black people, we feel most of the time more comfortable sharing anger than any other feeling because we don't really have a lot of freedom to be vulnerable. And so with grief, you have to be vulnerable, right? So a lot of times depression in us, especially Black men specifically, depression looks like anger. It's not really anger though. It is really that they are in deep, intense grief, sadness. And that reminds me of Ali Sadiq, where he was talking about when his younger sister passed. That's what he did. He was so full of pain that when he was out on the street, somebody just saying hello to him, or what's up with him, he was ready to like take them out because he was so full of hurt and pain because he lost his younger sister. I think she was 8 or 9 at the time. Bargaining, we have a tendency of like if someone is on their deathbed, we don't know what's going to happen. We may go to God and say, God, take me instead, or Lord, like if you save them now, I'll give myself to you, or I'll do better, or I'll whatever. And that is normal. We will bargain. I'm having a hard time with this, y'all. Depression could look like irritation. And again, it could look like anger. It can be sleepless nights where you can't rest. Like there's no way that you can get any rest. You're up all night. You can have loss of focus, obviously. And if you're not sleeping, you're definitely going to have loss of focus, right? But the last phase is acceptance. When you accept that this is it, you denied it, you had your anger, you bargained, you've gone through the depressive stages, and you get to acceptance, you're at a point where you're like, okay, this person is not coming back, whether that be divorce, separation, again, death, whatever it is. This is not coming back. And so I have to accept that this is the case, and now I can heal. And so that's the stage that you want you to get in. Now, there are ways to get to that stage, right? But a lot of times when we experience grief, we are trying to be isolated, and that's the last thing we actually need. Now, I'm a person that likes to isolate for a while, just because I go through so many emotions, and I don't feel that comfortable being vulnerable with people. Not because I fear being vulnerable, but just because I feel like a lot of people don't deserve to have that access to me. Like I have learned over time that some people, when you're vulnerable, they take that vulnerability and run with it and make it worse for you, okay? There's so many things that people do that are just so terrible with information when they could be a support, right? And so for me, I tend to go inside. I tend to get quiet. I tend to want to have my space to express myself the way that I want. And when I have a moment, I will go to someone that I trust and I will share how I'm feeling. But a lot of times I'm trying to protect other people. Like my boys, I don't want them to actually know the depth of the feelings I'm feeling because I don't want them to feel like, I don't want to burden them. I don't want them to feel like they have to carry that weight, right? But being vulnerable is very difficult for a lot of us, especially when we haven't had the freedom to do so. So when you find someone who is going through this type of grief, any type of grief, whether it's just separation, whatever it is, loss of limbs, like loss of the ability to move, make yourself available to them, right? Give them space to go through their grief the way they need to, but also make yourself available to talk when they're ready, okay? And be willing to listen. Be willing to be of support, because you just don't know. You just don't know. Again, I'm having a hard time with this right now, but I'm going to keep pushing through. All right. So ways you can move through grief. Of course, you have to acknowledge it and express it. Not expressing it is only going to make it worse. You can end up stroking yourself out if you don't express your feelings. Again, I know it's difficult to be vulnerable with people, but it's really important to have people around you that you may be able to go to express that grief, that you can express your vulnerabilities with. If you don't have those people around you, why are these people around you? I'm just saying, if you can't trust them with your feelings, why are they there? Okay. Self-care. Self-care is really important. That self-care could be being alone. That self-care could be taking a shower or taking a long hot bath or praying. It could be just watching a funny movie. Whatever that self-care is for you, that's what you should do. Okay? Seek support. Now, whether that be a therapist or, again, a friend, somebody, a family member, somebody who you can talk to, that's going to be really important in your grieving process. Okay? Routines. Now, routine is important because you want to kind of have some structure as you go, a way to have something to look forward to, if you will. Because you can get lost in grief to a point where you can't do anything. So it's really important to try to stick to some form of routine. All right. Forgiveness. If you have to forgive yourself, please do. If you have to forgive someone else, please do. Remember, forgiveness or unforgiveness is like holding chains to a situation. So if you're carrying grief or shame or anything like that around a death or any kind of loss, it's important to forgive yourself so that you can remove the chains that bind you to the situation. You don't want a negative bind to anything. You want it to be positive, right? Because negativity only brings you down. So it's really important for you to forgive so that that connection won't have you bound, okay? Celebrate the loss. Now listen, this is very difficult. What I mean by celebrate is acknowledge it. Do something like for instance, I have a tendency, like on my mom's birthday, on her death day specifically, I tend to find some kind of activity to do to support, like the idea of her to be able to like celebrate her life, not her death, but celebrate her life and do things that maybe she would have wanted to do, or do things that she enjoyed doing, even if that's just singing around the house. Find a way to acknowledge that person and to celebrate what they brought to your life, even if it was just for a little while. Okay. These are ways that you can move through grief. Again, I'm not trying to say that grief is easy. It is not. I'm definitely not trying to do that. Right now, I'm having a hard time, like I said, with this video because I'm grieving right now. I am grieving right now. But I have to be obedient. God wants me to do this. Maybe it's on my head. Maybe it's on my shoulders right now, too heavy, and He wants me to get it out. So, just being obedient. All right. So, Psalms 119, 27 through the 28th verse, and it goes, "Make me understand the way of your precepts, so that I will meditate, focus my thoughts on your wonderful works. My soul dissolves because of grief. Renew and strengthen me according to the promises of your word." Now, God promised He was going to be there for us. God promised that when we're at our loneliest, when we're downtrodden, when we're brokenhearted, He is there. All we have to do is call on Him. In fact, we don't have to call on Him. He's just there anyway. He's there walking through it through life with us every step of the way. He just wants you to know that he can comfort you. He can support you, right? But he just wants you to know that he hears you. He hears your prayers. Again, that does not mean that grief is going to be easy. It does not mean that it's going to make it short and sweet. I'm sorry, there's no time limit on grief. It can go on and on and on. It kind of just depends on you and your relationship with said person, or how the person passed, and all of those things, or what the situation is. All of those things play a part. But just know that God is with you. He's with all of us, and just a call away. Okay. Now, Lord, song for the day is "This Too Shall Pass." In the middle of the turbulence surrounding you, these trying times are so hard to endure. In the middle of what seems to be your darkest hour, hold fast and live, and be assured, this too shall pass, like every night that's come before it. He'll never give you more than you can bear. This too shall pass, so in the end you'll be comforted, for it's in his hands. And this too shall pass. Oh, blessings, y'all. Take care.